Wednesday evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are joining us from. Welcome, one and all. Welcome back to the Light 'em Up Lounge. Welcome for another industry panel discussion. We try to host these roughly every quarter, and especially here, getting close to the end of 2023. I'm super excited and happy and honored to welcome a spectacular panel here with me today at the Light 'em Up Lounge, where we want to discuss the year 2023 in review. We want to talk about what has been, what is, what will be, and to take a little glimpse into the crystal ball. So it is a privilege and a pleasure to welcome all of you. Before I introduce the panel, I want to say a very warm welcome to everybody joining us here live at the lounge via Zoom, and to all our treasured guests joining us on the live stream over on Facebook. If you have any questions, as always, please make yourselves heard, even over on Facebook. Put your thoughts into the comments. I'm always checking the live streams, and I'll happily forward your questions and your thoughts to our seasoned industry expert panel. And so without further ado, here's tonight's lineup. The wonderful one and only J.R. Davis from Blue Smoke of Dallas here with us. Jay, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time, and welcome back to Light 'em Up.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Next up, first premiere, and I'm super happy to welcome Ben Lee from the Smoking Syndicate here with us today. Ben, thank you so much for taking the time, and welcome to Light 'em Up.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Glad to be here.
Always a pleasure. The one and only Professor Jose. You certainly need no introduction, but well, nobody here does actually. But
no.
Jose,
Great
a friend, a fellow, a brother of Light 'em Up from day one. Welcome back.
No, it's always great to be on, and to be honest, I'm very happy that my good friend Ben Lee is on today, because a lot of people are in for a treat today.
I certainly think so and believe so. And we also have Matt Ty with us from How About That Cigar. Lovely to have Matt joining us right in the middle of the working day. I know the timing is not easy for all of you guys in the US, but Matt, it's a privilege to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Lovely. And we will have George Brightman joining us in just a second. However, he's just on the way, so we'll have him join the panel whenever he's ready and whenever he's here with us. I wanted to kickstart the show regardless, and I thought that we can split today's discussion and everybody's thoughts into three major pillars. And that is, on the one side, the raw material aspect, the growing, the tobacco, but also the manufacturing side, everything in regards to labor and what's happening on the manufacturer's level. Secondly, I want to take the commercial side into the equation with sales numbers, input numbers, prices obviously being an important aspect of that whole pillar as well. And then thirdly, the consumer side, some marketing aspects, communication, community building, and of course, consumer behavior. So just as a rough guideline, I thought we can structure it along the production and manufacturing value chain, if that makes sense. And so, Jose, let me start with you. And first of all, I'm curious, as a general question, what was your biggest surprise of the year so far?
To be honest, still to continue to see so many new factories, so many new companies, so much line extension, and still the people smoking, the amount of new stores, because I think the part of I'm not going to say that the internet sales have gone down a lot, but we know for a fact they're not as strong as they were, let's say the year before, maybe a year and a half before. And it has been, for the amount of stores that have been open, really good stores, that know they need good customer service, quality, good lounges, good humidity system, organized humidors. So what I'm hearing, and a lot of people are telling me, well, we had this guy, who was buying $200 on the internet from us, but if you buy on the internet, you can't socialize, you can't go to the club. So the guy's dividing because he wants to be on Instagram, he wants to be on Facebook, he wants to be on Twitter. So I think in the last couple of years, the dynamics have changed. But the biggest surprise to me is to see still the amount of people that want to get into the business. That to me it's shocking.
That's an interesting aspect. And because I said I would like to structure the discussion into three major pillars, from the manufacturing side over to the commercial and sales aspect, all the way down to the consumer. When you look at what's going on in the raw material, tobacco and manufacturing element, what's your thoughts on how the situation has unfolded in 2023, especially after the issues when it comes to supply chain and labor that we experienced most certainly during the COVID-19 pandemic? But of course, there's a ripple effect of all of these things, and they drag along, and we're still seeing some of that. On top of it all, this year is an El Nino year. So in particular, in Ecuador, for example, when we spoke with Trey and Angel Oliva, they spoke a lot about that aspect, putting quite a lot of pressure and a strain on the growers. So how do you look at that side of the industry when it comes to the supply, rather before we
Well,
demand
look,
on the side?
to be honest, we estimate, or from what we're hearing from different growers, different companies, and people we know, that 60 to 65% of the crop was lost. But then you have to factor in that Ecuador has a very unstable political situation. I'm not going to mention, but we know of two employees of two big growers that were kidnapped, and the ransom had to be paid. We know of a company that they wanted to extortion them, and the company didn't give in. And we know that the general manager of one of the big farms there, his Jeep or his SUV or some vehicle he had, a bomb was put there. So with the people I've been talking in the last 2 or 3 months, what they're telling me, Jose, it's not only the effects of El Nino, the amount of water, but it's really all these delinquents. The word is out that a lot of people, because in El Salvador, Bukele has done an amazing job. A lot of people have moved out, and it seems like the cartels and small wannabes have taken over with extortion and just making things hard. So on that, you have prices of tobacco that have gone through the roof. If you take Nicaragua, tobaccos that, let's say, last year were $8, $9, now you're seeing tobaccos, pisos and ligeros, $10, $11, even $12. Connecticut did not have a good crop this year. You have a huge amount of people growing tobacco, but the weather effects are really damaging a lot. So the way I see it, high prices for tobacco next year. We've already seen a whole bunch of companies that have announced a price increase. And what a lot of consumers don't understand is that when you're buying filler, let's say Estelí Ligero that you were buying for $9 2 years ago, and now it's 10, and now it's 11, because in the name of the game now it's not going to be. You could have the money, but if you don't have the contacts, it doesn't matter how much money you have, because a lot of these companies, the Olivas, the Perez, the Plasencia, Waldo Fernandez, and we all know who they are. They have been doing business with a lot of companies for years and years and years. And even though they might increase the tobacco, but they're not all of a sudden going to come and sell the tobacco to somebody that'll pay $1 or $2 more than that, because, we always say that everything that goes up comes down, because I personally don't think that we could have in 2025 this same amount of consumption and making this same amount of cigars. But I could be wrong. We were wrong in 21, wrong in 22, and we were wrong in 23. So let's see.
Jose, I have a question for you. So, and this would help a little bit clarity from our business standpoint, right? So as far as cellophane is concerned, we sell to suppliers who then sell to the brands, all the cigar brands. And we have seen, at least this year, a significant reduction in demand simply because most people had padded inventory due to this huge spike that we saw during COVID, right? So we had a spike in sales, but there's also some protection against supply chain issues. So have farmers or manufacturers and the brands also built up maybe some additional raw materials, expecting that growth that we saw during COVID was going to continue? And has there been an offset by destruction of crop or availability of raw materials where it's kind of leveled out? Or do you think some of them are still heavy on those raw material stocks?
Look, it depends, to be honest. I'm going to talk from the Fuente side. I'll put it to you this way. Let's say that for the next 6 years, the earth would freeze and you couldn't grow a leaf of tobacco. With the inventory that we've always kept high inventories, we could keep making the same amount of cigars with the same, because of the amount of fillers, binders, and wrappers that we have. And I can tell you one thing, there's not a lot of companies that could say that. But then you have small and medium-sized companies, that even if they wanted, they don't have the money for that. And I got to tell you something. Look, you could cut it any way you want. Next year, a lot of the small companies and medium-sized companies are going to face two things: or they increase their prices and hope that consumer that was buying that cigar for $6 all of a sudden it's $7 or $7.50, or they just make less cigars and still keep their margins there. So the way I see it, I hope this continues as strong as it is, but I don't see 2025. But like I said before, we were wrong in 21. We were wrong in 21, 22, and 23, because I thought this year, we would see the industry going down a little. Even though the imports, for a fact, we know we're not going to hit the 466 million of last year. We're estimating maybe 445, maybe 450, but I don't think we're going to be over 450. I could be wrong.
Okay. Interesting. Well, I appreciate it. Before I mute myself again, I'm going to make a recommendation that we all pass the hat around for a donation for Reinhard to purchase a badass microphone like Matt has and gets that smooth radio voice going. I was impressed, Matt. I think you're the first guy I've seen on here who's had a mic set up like that. When you talked, I was saying, wow, that is impressive.
It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all smoke and mirrors.
Look at that. Reinhard, that's all you, brother. You need one of those.
And Dave, you haven't even seen his camera rig and all the beautiful lighting and all the other stuff that costs $500,000 he has in the studio around him.
It's impressive. Impressive.
You know what my biggest issue is, Dave? I've been hosting this show at 11 in the morning from upstairs in Napa Cigars in Napa Valley, 11 at night at some cigar lounge in Dubai, and pretty much everything in between. So unless I always travel with a full suitcase only of camera and microphone gear, I have to keep it lightweight and somewhat easy to handle.
You got to hire a crew. You need a sound crew and an audio, a camera crew. You're big time now. So let's get past this small time thinking.
You know, what really matters is the content coming from our wonderful guests. I'm just a humble facilitator. Speaking of wonderful guests, I want to pass the microphone to J.R. Davis, and reflecting a little bit on what Jose just shared with us. Jay, how does that translate over to the retail side of things? And have you seen similar things happening, similar dynamics, and do you come to the same conclusions as Jose looking back on the past 12 months?
Well, we certainly don't have 6 years worth of inventory. Jose and I talked about this a little bit before the show, and I was just crunching some numbers here, and like our sales are up about 6% this year, but if I look at the number of cigars sold, we're down about 3%. So a lot of that's just inflation. But still, when I compare 2023 versus 2020, we're still up 60%. So from a sales perspective, yes, things have cooled off. Particularly the last 3 to 4 months have been slower for us, and it was much harder to sell cigars this year than it was last year. But our peak, our base is much higher than it was pre-pandemic. So I think that we're going to continue to see a little cooling off in the market. In the United States, I think part of that's due to the economy and interest rates. I think part of it is due to more people going back into an office where they have less opportunity to smoke. And I can say that from a backorder perspective, it seems like companies are catching up. Though I'm still concerned, and I definitely would like to get Ben Lee's opinion on this, is with a few exceptions, I think in general, I would say that quality control and construction of cigars is not where it should be and has not been where it should have been for the last 2 or 3 years, indicating to me cigars are being rushed. And also there has been a large migration of rollers from Nicaragua and maybe to a lesser extent from Honduras and the Dominican. So I don't know if there's as much experience rolling cigars in the factories, but I can only speak of that qualitatively. I don't run a factory. Jose might have a better perspective than on me. But I definitely think that the boom, whatever, is over, but I don't think it's like when the cigar boom ended, 20 years ago, that we're coming crashing back. I think that there's probably a new threshold. I noticed a lot of new smokers, but I also saw a number of people that had left the cigar hobby during the first boom who have returned. So people who have not been smoking for 20, 25 years are back. So I think there are more cigar smokers in the United States now than there were in 2019 and 2018, which were tougher years in the US.
Excellent points. And Ben, I'll use that segue comment and the question over to you to the point that Jay mentioned in regards to the quality. I mean, it's that part of the year where everybody's just gearing up to launch the top 25 lists. Coop is already well on the way, introducing his top 30, I believe it's this year that he's introducing. And looking back on all the cigars that you enjoyed this year, have you seen changes in terms of manufacturing quality and the overall standard of excellence that you would expect for premium cigars?
Yeah, actually I have. We've actually talked about that a lot with within our circle, a Coop Coalition team. Is we've seen a lot of wrappers that don't seem to be fermented correctly, lots of tunneling, more cigars we've had ever this year that have been tunneling, and canoeing, just different things. Now I've noticed, honestly, probably the last quarter of the year, some of the cigars that are beginning now don't seem to have as many problems as they did earlier in the year and later last year. So it seems to be it's getting a little bit better, but it did seem to me to where manufacturers were trying to rush out cigars to fill the need or fill back orders or fill a void that they perceive that's in the market, that they just weren't ready, either with the fermentation or using inexperienced rollers or whatever. And I attributed some of that to the pandemic because we know we've heard a lot of factories lost workers and they didn't really come back. So basically you have to, scale back up with less inexperienced workers. So they're not going to do as good a job. And you'll see, a decline in quality because of that. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of things. So when I did see a lot of, like at the beginning of the year, it was really bad. It was almost like at least once a week I was getting a cigar that had a tunnel in it. Some were massive, so it was really, really bad. But I've noticed lately that there's been a lot less of that going on. So hopefully we're going back to where, we're getting some quality control back that is, reasonable, and they're catching a lot of these problems too. So, because I mean, if you're losing rollers and the bunchers and everybody else, you're going to lose quality control people as well. It's just ratios. So now it seems like the factories have geared fully back up again. They're kind of a little bit back to normal as much as possible at this point, and hopefully that translates into better quality cigars that we're seeing. we're getting sometimes tobacco in cigars is just not ready yet. They need some time. So, you smoke a cigar and you're like, it's a little off. Let me set it down and we'll come back to it about 6 months. You come back to it and you're like, okay, yeah, this is tasting a lot better now. Where, we really shouldn't have to do that, right? I'm going to talk about, New World cigars, not really Cubans, because we always have to do that. But so it's kind of a different factors coming in where the quality of cigars was just not as good, but I do see it getting better. I've noticed it being better lately.
Now, one thing to keep in mind is that even though we're sort of looking back on the past year and some of the experiences that Ben, you, for example, are just sharing, and what Jay was referring to in terms of the quality of the cigars and how you perceive them, is what happened over the course of 2023. But isn't that a ripple effect of what happened in years prior to that? Either during the pandemic, the tobacco needs time, cigars need time, whether that's in the aging, in the manufacturing side, after manufacturing, until it trickles down to the end consumer. There's quite a bit of a time span in between that needs to pass. So maybe, Jose, that's a question for you as to where do you see those issues occurring, or where do you think the root cause lies for some of the things that we've just been discussing?
Look, to be honest, I think Ben, I think Jay touched a little bit about it. Look, we all know that the pandemic was very hard. A lot of lives were lost. A lot of people didn't even want to come back because, people start rumors, tobacco this, tobacco that. Nicaragua is one of the countries that's been hit the hardest because they're the country that have lost the most amount of rollers. And we know for a fact that a lot of factories are even having buses that go 25, 30, 40 kilometers every day to pick up young men and women to teach them to roll cigars and, how to put on the bands and work with the cellophane and with the boxes and in the fermentation and many things. And to be honest, we have our show, we never mention brands, and everybody knows that I smoke a ton of cigars. And I got to tell you, it's one of the things that I saw more than anything else, and I'm going to agree with Ben, is I saw a lot of tunneling. So what is tunneling is all about? It's when that cigar, the buncher, is putting on the leaves, that he doesn't put them in the proper position. And also he leaves what we call bache, which is a soft spot, which is going to produce or a mouse, or it's canoeing, or it's going to be tunneling. And there was a lot of cigars that were given to me at the show because everybody brings me cigars. And to be honest, I would say that 30-40% of them had burning issues. Then there was another percentage that when you take the foot of the cigar and you pick up that ammonia, because there's ammonia of youngness and there's also ammonia of really raw, unfermented tobacco that a lot of people don't realize. So I think that a lot of people, because of the demand there was, they rush things. And I think that because things have slowed down for a lot of brands, I would say for maybe 80 or 85% of the brands, I think they have all the pipelines filled. I think that's why maybe right now you're seeing cigars with a little bit more of age. Maybe tobacco's a little bit older that we use, and maybe the quality is coming back. And one thing, I think it was Jay who said it, of course, we're not going to see what happened in 98, 96, 97. There was 418 million cigars. Then the next year we went down by 23%. In 98, then in 97, we went down by, it was 21 and 23. So we lost in 2 years of imports almost 50% of the market. If the imports come down this year, I think again they're going to be around the 450. So if you take 466 million and you take off 15, that's roughly 4 or 5% maybe. So it's not that bad, but it's still a big number. 450 million cigars is a lot of cigars.
Definitely. Matt, how do you look at that? Are we even capable of learning from our history, or do you think we'll just repeat the same faults as some of the things that we've seen during the boom might just hit us hard again?
Well, are we capable of learning from our history? Absolutely. Do we always succeed at that? No. And yeah, I remember the quality drop back in the late 90s, and it was it was extreme back then. Now, I don't think this quality drop is near as extreme as it was back then. Back then, so many cigars were being shipped that were just unsmokable. I mean, they just reeked of ammonia and would barely even light, let alone burn properly through the smoking experience. I would say that I noticed more quality issues last year in 2022. I agree with Ben that things are improving. Um, I've had less burn issues in 2023 than I did in 22. But and Jose is also 100% spot on that as we see import numbers drop, the fewer units you're asking your people to produce, that's just going to be one piece of the puzzle that will help to reduce shipments of less than stellar cigars. And you put that together with experienced, the rollers who are currently inexperienced gaining more experience, maybe some of the experienced rollers coming back to work in the cigar factories, and these companies getting back to their standards where they say we're not going to put this tobacco into the hands of the rollers until it's ready. And so many other pieces, you put those pieces together and we're going to see quality come back up again. But this little dip we've seen in quality in the last few years is nothing compared to what it was in the late 90s. So many horrible cigars were being shipped to the hands of consumers back then, and it's not nearly as bad today.
I wanna say something. Matt is correct because I'll give you an example. On the boom of 96, 97, in Dominican Republic, there was more than 40 factories. And the only two factories that survived was Hochi, my cousin, and Lito Gomez. All the rest, they all disappeared. And the same thing happened in Nicaragua. It didn't have so many factories. The same thing happened now. And it's true, the quality issues of today, it's like night and day. If the quality issues of the boom of 97 would have been the ones we see today, the boom would have still gone on for a while. But it got so bad, like Matt says. I mean, not only the ammonia, they didn't burn. It was like cigars were made out of anything they could make. At least now people have respected, a long filler cigar. It's a sandwich. It's a short filler. At least those things have been respected in this boom. So I agree with Matt on that one.
Now, Matt mentioned importation numbers, and that is one metric to look at. However, I'm curious, Ben and Matt, also to you, as part of the cigar media community, and another aspect that you see is the number of press releases about new cigars being launched, for example. Do you feel like there has been an increase of new cigars, or rather limited releases hitting the market because the manufacturers are trying to fill up the pipeline?
Yeah, we actually talked about that this year too, and really the last year and this past year. There seems to be a lot of new cigars, but most of them are limited editions or limited runs. Not as many core line extensions. So, like for instance, you might have a company release 6 new cigars, and 4 of those are limited releases of some kind. Now, whether that's because they're using some rare tobacco, they don't have enough of a supply to make it a core, or what, I don't know. But there seems to be the past few years a real emphasis on not extending or adding a new core line, but more focus on creating a new limited edition cigar. I mean, which is fine and all, but I don't know how you maintain that for a long time. So, and something else I've noticed too, you'll see a lot of core lines will come out, and they might run 1 or 2 years, and then they're scrapped, and then something else will come out. Like, you don't see a longevity like you used to back in the day with some of these core lines either, which I don't really know what that's attributed to, except maybe, the factories or the companies think, the cigar smoker has a shorter, attention span, and they're like, well, I just want what's new coming out? What's the new thing? I want the new thing. And they're trying to refresh their catalogs. I don't know. But I did notice that
Ben,
too.
you just made me think of one question, and that is, what's actually a core line? Is it a core line because you just call it that way, or shouldn't it rather be, proof is in the pudding? Once a certain brand has established itself and has been on the market, tried and tested for 5 years, whatever the number might be, right? Then you consider it a core line because it's part of your base offering that you will bring back every single year. And what's the essence of calling something a core line if you just discontinue it after 1 or 2 years? To your point.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I mean, to me, a core line is something that's available all year round, that the retailer can order anytime they want, and it's not, oh, that's only available in this season or that season, or we're going to skip a year or whatever, or there's a limited number and then it's gone or whatever. To me, a core line is, as a consumer first, is something that is the backbone of any cigar company. Something that basically it tells me a lot about what you are as a company, your core product, right? And then your limited editions is some kind of derivative of those cores of something. So to me, if you have a strong core line, that's going to make me really pay attention to you more, instead of somebody just says, "Oh, here's a new limited, here's a new limited, here's a new limited, here's," because I'm going to lose interest in you. I used to chase cigars. Now I rarely chase anything because it's not worth the juice. So there's only a few that I do now. But to me, a good strong core line will carry that company through everything. It's all that's a good money maker year round, and you don't have to worry about, oh, how am I going to replicate this? Where am I going to get this new tobacco at again, or whatever? So yeah, to me, a core line is something available all the time, and it's not a limited production. That's what I consider a core line.
Well, and Ben, you bring up a good point that it made me think of. I mean, we've all been there as consumers where a brand will have a core line that's regular production, that's been on the market for a few years, that we've come to enjoy. And then, even though we come to enjoy it, maybe it's not selling as well as the brand needs it to, and they want to put their efforts into other cigars. So they decide to shelf that core line and take it out of their portfolio. One that comes to mind for me is Crux Cigars, one of their early core lines. And Crux isn't a super old company, but they've been around for coming up on 10 years, I believe. And one of their early core lines was called the Crux Passport. And I really enjoyed that cigar a lot. But it wasn't doing as, after the first 3 years, when they did some rebranding and started to put some focus into some other lines, those lines started to do so well that they said, okay, this Passport's not doing as well as it was before. We're going to pull it, and maybe they'll bring it back someday. But I respect companies that look at their portfolio and say, you know what, maybe this used to be doing well for us, but it's not anymore. So we're going to put our efforts elsewhere in order to reach as many consumers as we can and be as maybe blend diverse as we can. I respect that.
Yeah, I do as well. And look, a company, to any company in any industry, has to be agile in today's market, right? That includes cigar companies. So, if you have a blend that, you were kind of a foundation, but then you kind of diversify the portfolio more and it's not doing as well, or you basically get too big and you have to move factories. Maybe that core line original couldn't be replicated with the tobacco available from this new factory. Then you gotta redo something. But the bigger concern is just dropping cores and doing mostly all limiteds. Like that's not good. I don't think it's a good business model. For the consumer, it's not good.
Uh, I love the points that both of you made, Ben and Matt, and I'm curious. Do you think that a young company or even a new company entering the market today is less likely to establish a strong core portfolio? And I look at it from a few different angles. One, Ben, I love the fact that you mentioned you have to be agile in today's market environment. As a young company, it's most likely more challenging to get your hands on a plethora of great tobacco and an ongoing supply of excellent tobacco that is the strong foundation of a core brand, for example. And also, maybe it's a general thing where younger companies with a young founder or CEO have a different mindset and think about the industry at large differently, whereas the icons of the industry like Fuente, Padron, Ashton, you name it, without going to specific companies here, have an easier shot at creating or maintaining their core brands. How do you look at that, or do you think that's a viable thought and presumption?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I've actually had a couple of friends that within the past 5 years has actually started cigar companies, and it really depends on the person, right? Like, so if you want to be more involved in selecting your blends, not necessarily going and blending yourself, because most new owners really don't have that experience or that knowledge to do something like that. But if you at least study tobacco and get a good understanding of how different tobaccos taste and ferment and how they age and how they meld together and to form get a good recipe for a blend, basically. If you have that kind of a knowledge, a lot of my friends that have done that, had that kind of a knowledge, they usually do start with a core. And usually it's, you have a Connecticut, a Maduro, and then either a Habano or a Corojo blend. And you start with just that. And then later on, you add a limited on, like one or two or whatever, But I've also had another friend of mine that has a really good, strong core line, but then he also has a lot of limited releases that come out once a quarter. And those are really sought after. People love them. And it's kind of the exclusivity of that. People kind of like that chase because it's a limited release, a special blend that this is the only chance you'll probably get it. And it's known. This is it. We have this many cigars, and once they're gone, they're gone. It might not ever come back again. So if you want it, come get it. And that kind of thought with the consumer kind of gets them, like, they get them on the hunt and they go after that. So really both business models kind of work. It just kind of depends on really how do you see your company in the future, in the long term, right? Where are you going to go? To me, having a foundation core, to me, if I had to do it, I would have a foundation of a core that add limiteds, selectively through the years, not have, no core, just doing a bunch of limiteds, But today, I think, you got a lot more people now are more savvy about the tobacco business than were back in the boom, where people were just wanting to get any cigar and just stick their name on it. They didn't even know what was in the cigar, had no idea, and just slapping a label on it, say, "Hey, this is my cigar. Do you want to buy it?" But today, I think most of the people coming into the business have a lot more knowledge, probably because they kind of saw what happened in the past in the late 90 boom and said, okay, well, we've learned our mistakes then, so we're not going to replicate that again. So, but yeah, to me, I think a core line is important. I think it really is important for a new brand to kind of get out there, because the one thing too about a limited release is they're more expensive, right? They're because you use a rare tobacco or more age, and it costs more. If you have a core, a good staple, you get your foot in its different cigar shops with a cigar with a decent price point, right? And you can get your product in front of more people that way and start building a buzz and building your name before you start adding limited releases that are much more expensive.
Well, and to add on to that, Ben, I'll say, especially if your core lines are not shipping. If you're putting out a bunch of limited releases, and this is frustrating as a consumer. I know it can be frustrating under certain circumstances for the retailers on the panel, that when you have customers that are coming into your shops looking to get their favorite core lines from their favorite brands and they can't get them, but you've got 6 new boxes of this new limited release, yet they can't get their core lines, that can be frustrating for consumers and retailers alike.
Yeah, I
I
agree
want
with
to.
that.
I wanted to
Go ahead,
say
Jose.
something. Interesting what both of you have said, but talking about core lines, till this day, I don't know anybody, XYZ name, that has sold a company to a bigger company or to somebody, a private entity, based on limited editions and limited releases, because the core line is what makes it. Let's talk about Padron. Okay, Padron 64, the 26, the 44, the 45, but they have the 1000, 2000, 3000. It's the core line. Our core line, what is it? Chateau, double Chateau, all day long. The Magnum, the Hemingways, all the other stuff. It's not the Opuses and all that. We make millions and millions of cigars, and like Padron and other companies do. The limited editions are good. Once in a while, you make money on it. But you can't sell a company or build up a company to a certain position with just limited editions. Let's say if you make 10 million cigars, no, let's make a smaller number. Let's say you make 2 million cigars a year. Do you think you could make those 2 million cigars limited editions all the time? Because you want the recognition of the company, you want the recognition of the brand. And like Matt said, you want to go into the shop and find that cigar that you've been smoking for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And we don't have to mention the brands, because we know the cigars from a lot of companies that have been out there 30, 40, 50 years, that still to this day people are buying them. Don't get me wrong. I don't have anything against limited editions, but you can't build up a company. I could be wrong, but I don't think you could build up a company just doing limited editions. My 2 cents.
A very brief follow-up question on that, because we were discussing the manufacturing and raw material aspect before. From your experience on the manufacturing side, do you think that the shift towards more limited editions rather than focusing on core blends is a natural consequence of limitations and shortages on the raw material side?
It depends. Because there's people, and I don't want to mention companies, that, all of a sudden they have 30, 40 bales of Piloto Cubano that's 10 years old, and they got this Habano binder that's 7 years old, and then they have this maybe Sumatra Ecuador wrapper from 12 years ago. You can't put that in a huge production, but you can make it into a limited edition. And to be honest, I've tried a lot of these limited editions. God, I got to tell you, they really, really are good. And I respect a lot of them that do it, because they're saying, well, I only have tobacco to make it 50, 60,000 cigars. You sell them, that's it. What I don't like is all these people that say, oh, this is a limited edition. We're only going to make 1,000 boxes. And all of a sudden next year, there's 1,000 boxes more. So you start to lose credibility. And I think, and Ben would know this more than me and Matt, there's a lot of consumers that have been angry because they've gone to buy something supposed to be numbered from 1 to 500, and I got box 388 that I paid $300 for it. And then next year, that company's going to come out with, oh, no, we found more tobacco. No, you got to keep to your word. I think it's very important because the consumer, especially those who buy limited editions and spend money, they don't like to be cheated. I mean, I could be wrong, but I want to hear what Ben says about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've seen that before too, and it really angers the consumer, and you sour them on your entire brand when you do something like that. And I don't want it to sound like I'm kind of bashing on limited releases because most of them are very good cigars. They're fantastic. But I was just saying, like, to just base everything off of just limiteds, I don't particularly think it's a good model, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that to where, oh yeah, this is a limited run. We only have this much tobacco. It's 4,000-year-old tobacco we found in the back of a warehouse or whatever. It's all smoke and mirrors, but it's, you know, I think today's consumer is a lot more educated and a lot more savvy nowadays to where you just can't pull the wool over their eyes like some companies thought they could back in the day. So yeah, when you do something like that, you burn some bridges and you might lose customers that you will never get back, no matter what you do.
Great point. Jay, all of this taken into consideration, how has your humidor and the offering on your shelves changed over the last couple of months?
Over the last couple of months, not too much. I think that maybe if you go back to 2016, I think FDA is responsible for a lot of this, at least in the United States. There was a need to get something on shelves, even if it wasn't a finished blend. And I think it really increases mentality of what's new. And I think that particularly if you're a new company and you're struggling to get recognition from the various reviewers and whatnot, sometimes a limited edition can answer that splash of what's new. But to echo what Ben has said, you know, the lifeblood of the industry is core brands. You know, whether it's, you know, Monte Cristo No. 2 or Padron 1964 or Perdomo Champagne. If people like a cigar, then they're going to buy that cigar over and over and over again. Like Jose mentioned, you have brands like Don Carlos that, you know, that brand's been around since what, 1976 or something, a long time. So I think that if you're a new company and you don't have access to a lot of tobacco, particularly if you want to use something that's hard to get, like African Cameroon or Connecticut broadleaf, sometimes a limited edition is a way for you to get mentioned. Because I face that every single day. What's new? And it's like drinking through a fire hose these days. You know, you go to the trade show and there's, I don't know, 200 or 300 new releases, and you have to choose and curate what you're going to bring in. I mean, look at Dunbarton Tobacco came out with, I want to say, 5 offerings at the show, most of which are core lines. Foundation came out with 2 or 3 new core lines and limiteds. That's just 2 companies. And you've only got so much shelf space, and you have to figure out. So if a consumer comes in and they want to know what's new, well, they're probably already going to look for Arturo Fuente. They're going to look for Padron. They're going to look for Rocky Patel. But are they going to look for Ben Lee Bull Shark cigars? Not if they've never heard of Ben Lee. So if Ben comes out with a very exciting limited edition. So I think yes, I agree that core lines have to be what grows you and sustains you over time. But if you're new, if you want to get your name out there, sometimes coming out with that splashy limited to get people's attention, or if you're a struggling company and maybe you only have 1 or 2 lines out there, I can see why the limiteds are there. And I think that you need particularly as a new company, I think you need a balance of that, because it takes a while to build relationships with farmers. I mean, Jose knows this a whole lot better than I do. I'm just parroting what I've heard, but it's one thing to make a cigar. but can you make that cigar consistently year after year? Can you get boxes? Can you get cellophane? Can you get labels? Have you figured out how to get it through customs? Do you have a distribution network of good salespeople? Do you have a customer-friendly way for retailers to buy the cigar, or are you going to sell direct to consumers, or are you going to do both? So when you look at all of that, I think the limited editions make sense for newer companies. And if you're a more mature company, maybe you can do like Padron's coming out with like their 96, or like once a year, Fuente will come out with their Anejos, or Tatuaje will come out with their Monster Series. So I think it depends. If you're a much younger company, I think you have to use something that's going to answer the what's new debate to, first of all, get the retailer's attention, but then secondarily, to get the consumer's attention. But at the end of the day, you have to develop core lines that are going to sustain decade after decade. And that's, to me, that's true at Carmel Center as a company. If you can do that, then you're going to be successful in this industry if you get permanent shelf space.
Jay, in the beginning, Jose mentioned that he's surprised by the number of new companies and newcomers to the industry, giving it a shot and trying to get their name out there. Then we talk about the plethora of new releases and how it's almost overwhelming, not only for you as a retailer, because there's limited shelf space and real estate is always the crucial element of the equation, but of course also for the end consumer to still keep up with everything that's coming at you. How do you see that balancing out on the mid to long-term run here? Do you think it's a trend that will continue, or do you already see a certain slowdown in regards to that dynamic?
I think cigars are one of those industries that someone with $100,000 who likes cigars thinks that they can do it. And there are factories out there that are willing to make small run batches. So I think there's always going to be new entrants. But I think Jose made the interesting point that there were 40 some factories in the Dominican before the boom, and after there were only a few left. I mean, La Aurora, Fuente, and LFD and whatnot. So I think that's I think the $64 million question. How does a new company become the next Rocky Patel? Or how does a new company become the next Tatuaje? And that's, if someone could write a book on that we'd all be interested in reading it, because I think it's very difficult. But at the end of the day, I think the companies that have survived, they've survived because they have consistent quality core brands that are affordably priced. And the heads of those companies are willing to travel a lot and stay in a lot of hotel rooms and go to a lot of brick and mortars, go to a lot of events, hand out a lot of cigars and things like the Big Smoke. And at the same time, manage to make people like them. You know, we are definitely a brand-oriented business. When someone says Carlito Fuente is coming to a store, people want to come. People say Jonathan Drew is coming to a store, they want to come. So I think that if you're somebody that has that drive and charisma, you can do it. But there's a myriad of things that are very complicated in running a cigar company. Now, Cigar Coop and I were just talking today about a particular brand that I really like and he likes. It's a good cigar. It's very affordable. It's in that $6 to $8 price range, but their packaging doesn't get people's attention, and you have to tell the story. So it's not just about making a good cigar, and even making that good cigar consistent year after year and dealing with farmers. I mean, every manufacturer I've talked to that's been in the business for less than 40 years, they all have stories about how they have this great cigar, and then they go to buy next year's crop, and the farmer sold what they're going to sell to them to someone else. How do you handle that? So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I think it's very difficult to enter right now into the industry because there's so many. But as a result, that we get a lot of great cigars, like Ben said. Some of these limited editions of new cigars that come out, it's like, wow. But the question is, can you do it next year? Can you do it the year after? Can you do it when there's a lot of rain and most of the crops wiped out? How do you handle most of the wrappers in Ecuador being destroyed? Can you make that cigar again? And I think that's the challenge. And the companies that figure that out, they're going to be here for the long term. And the companies that don't, people will be talking about, oh, I remember that cigar by so-and-so. It was so great, but they don't make that anymore. And there's more failures than successes.
Partially related to that, Jay, and I think also one of the biggest storylines of 2023 was the incredible price point of some of new cigars that hit the market. And that is all across the board, from new companies to old and established companies, from companies that are primarily established in that high-end super premium segment of the industry, but also companies that rather have a very solid and strong offering of more affordable and more approachable cigars. Curious to hear thoughts from all of you on the panel in regards to the price discussion, because at the same time, what we're seeing is the gap is widening in all parts of society and economy, where yes, the luxury segment is going extremely strong with stupid amounts of money being thrown out, and at the same time, so many people are struggling and turning every penny because it's tough to survive and life has become very, very expensive. How do you see that?
That's a great question, and I know that Jay and Ben are gonna get into this. Listen, what surprises me is this, and again, we don't mention companies. I see the press release, whether it's from Coop or Cigar Aficionado or from Half Wheel, it doesn't matter who it is. 3 guys who got together, they love cigars, they went to XYZ country, they made the cigars, and the first thing out of the blue is that I see a Robusto, $18, a Toro, $20, a 6x60, $22, and a Figurado, box press, whatever, $24. Nobody knows who they are. And when people ask me about that, I tell them, listen, if it's worth $20, it's going to sell. It's not about the fancy packaging or the girl or the label or the colors. If it's a $22 cigar and it performs and smokes like a $22 cigar, people will buy it. But what I'm seeing, and a lot of people are telling me, is they're seeing a lot of $30 cigars, $40 cigars, $50 cigars that do not even perform as a $10 cigar. And those people who think that they can get away with those things are totally wrong. Because I think it was Ben who said it, or Jay, or both of them. The consumer of today is not the consumer of 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or even the boom days. People today want a $5 cigar, but they want a $5 value. There's cigars that are being sold for $100 all day long, but it's a value of $100. So the main thing, the cigar has to perform, and if the cigar performs, you could put the price you want on it. But if it doesn't perform, people will buy it one time, and even if they like you, they'll buy it 2 times, but it will not survive because of packaging or fancy advertisement. The cigar has to perform. And I've seen prices that we all talk and say, but how can this be? Nobody who knows who these people are. And they could be great people, but, at the end of the day, we've all smoked some of those cigars, and then, we look at ourselves and say, like, really, $25? My 2 cents.
Well, Jose is right. The cigar has to perform. When you have companies that, we've mentioned their names several times, you have companies that have been in business for 30, 40, 60, 80 years, and they have cigars that are in the $20 to $30 price point, and they consistently perform. People are going to measure that new cigar. So the company that you do work with, Reinhard, for example, they have some very expensive cigars. The difference is they deliver, and they kind of have access to a good grower, last time I checked. And they're making it worth their while. I'm sure it's the same in the bourbon industry. If you want to charge $80 for a bottle of bourbon versus, let's say, $30, people need to experience that difference. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of really good cigars that are in that $15 to $30 price range that have been made for decades from very, very solid companies. And you've got to do something extraordinary to get people to spend more. And like Jose said, they might buy that cigar 1 or 2 or 3 times, but if they're going to buy boxes, it's very difficult to achieve that. So, yeah, I think there's always going to be, and it's particularly with what you're seeing with the prices of Habano cigars. I think that there's an attitude that worries me a little bit that we haven't talked about. I had a couple of manufacturers at the trade show say to me, yeah, the cigar is $100. We don't know if it's going to sell in the United States, but it sure as hell is going to sell in the Middle East or it's going to sell in China. And to me, that's kind of a reckless attitude. I think you should make a cigar that you know is going to compete with a Padron 1926 or with a Diamond Crown, and not think, oh, well, because Cuba's had some issues with some construction issues and they're charging $300 for a Cohiba, I can charge $200 or $300 for a cigar that isn't good enough. And that arrogance worries me when a manufacturer or a rep will tell me that as a retailer. I want you to tell me, I want you to be like Nelson Alfonso and sit down and say, this is why the cigar costs $40, because we do this and we do this, and it's a period of years and we do this. So for example, if I'm going to present a Marifel cigar to a customer, I understand what it goes into making the ribbon. I understand what it took to design the technology to make that band. I understand about the use of the Japanese wood and why that's done. I understand about the way that the cigar is made in one country and stored in another country. So you have to be able to explain that. The customer has to feel like they have value. And it doesn't matter what you're buying. Does the customer perceive value, particularly when there are a lot of very good benchmarks in that $15 to $30 or $40 price range? And if you're company X and you've been producing a line of cigars that are $40 for years, that company is going to get a little bit more trust than a company you've never heard of.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. There's not really much I can add, honestly, to both of what y'all said. But to me, I also see something too as a consumer is that, I mean, let's be honest, a cigar is a luxury item, right? So you're going to always have the consumer that wants to get the most bang for their value, which I would consider would be most of the consumers. But you're also going to have that segment to where it's just like almost like a status symbol or something. And if somebody wants to come out with a 100, 200, or we know there's a $500 cigar out there, they're going to buy it because it's that luxury item. And to them, it's, it's no different from buying like a Rolex or, Lamborghini or whatever. It's kind of in that same mindset too. So there's always going to be somebody that will pay that price, but at the point, you're going to get to a point to where, especially with like cigars, like the Habanos SA sitting, gauging their price points off of basically Hong Kong pricing and what the gray market was getting for those originally, that won't work with something that's sold in the United States because this market already has established a baseline of what they established cigars should cost, right? So you'll have that consumer that definitely is always going to want that best bang for their buck. But like I said, you'll always have that 1% or whatever that will pay those extraordinary prices for those cigars, no matter what they cost. And they honestly don't care, might not even really know if it's a good cigar or not. So just like with any luxury product, you're going to have basically kind of 2 sets of consumers at the minimum.
Excellent points from all of you. I greatly appreciate that. One thought, Che, and what's interesting, I hear your comment about some of the manufacturers, arguing that no matter what price they charge, if it doesn't go down all too well with the U.S. consumer base, you can still sell it in the Middle East. I don't necessarily consider that to be true and the case, because what I have experienced in all of the international markets, those are well-educated consumers that for a long time have been very fond of their Cuban cigars, reluctant to change, and it takes a very strong argument in the form of an excellent cigar to convince them to not only try that, but come back and buy that cigar over and over again. And just sticking a high price point on it and trying to sell that internationally because it's somewhere at the same price level of a Cuban cigar won't do the trick. So I'm curious if that will truly be a way to success for a lot of the manufacturers.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I don't think it will. When you, and I hate to name names, but when you look at Davidoff or Padron, Arturo Fuente, some of these companies that are around for a long time, La Aurora, and they have a cigar that maybe is $20, $25. That company has earned the trust of consumers for decades, sometimes centuries. And people are more willing to do that. And those companies tend to be very price conscious. I remember talking with George Padron 2 trade shows ago about a particular price increase. And it was really a modest price increase, maybe 3%. And he started sweating, talking to me, saying, you know, we went over and over and over. We were so worried that we want to take care of our consumers. And you've got a man like that who, if they put their family name on a cigar, people are going to want to buy it. But the concern that, well, what if we raise this 3%? Is that something that's going to alienate our customers? I think that those are the types of companies that survive, and the companies that, like you said, have this cavalier attitude of, well, you know, we'll just charge whatever. You know, the proof's in the pudding on that. You have to have something really exceptional to get people to consistently spend that kind of money, because there are still very, very good cigars in the United States for under $10 that you can buy by the box, and they're fantastic. So for a consumer that smokes 1 cigar a year, fine. But for that consumer, maybe like Ben, who maybe smokes 3 cigars a day, you've got to really convince them to spend extra on that cigar.
I want to say something about this because I think I'm probably not going to say the most, but I think there's very few people who have traveled the international market and have been all over the world like I've been. Anybody who thinks that you have an expensive cigar that's not selling in the States, and because of the shortage of Cubans, you're going to sell it or in Dubai or in Lebanon or in France or in Spain, you got it wrong, but that's not the way it works. With the shortage of Cubans, what the consumers, the people who have money for expensive stuff, are looking for quality of old name, consistent brands. And I don't want to mention companies that couldn't sell expensive cigars in the States, and they tried to sell them in Europe and in Dubai and in Asia, and it didn't work. Because it's not about the price, it's about the quality, and that the cigar has to perform. That's the way I see it. I could be wrong.
I think you're spot on, Jose. Absolutely.
It was something that got me thinking too, was what we're talking was with the price increases from Habanos SA kind of realigning themselves with the pricing from Asia, like Hong Kong. That was a massive price increase, right? It was not incremental, right? It was kind of almost overnight kind of a thing. I was wondering, Jose really could answer this probably the best, was do you see a ripple effect of that into cigar companies in the Dominican and Nicaragua and Honduras as well? Not to that extreme, but saying, oh, well, they can do that, so maybe we can do a little bit of that as well, and the consumer will be kind of okay with that.
You know, Ben, it's good that you brought that up because, you know, as a 74-year-old man, you don't remember. You have thoughts, but they don't all come out. A lot of people, we all talk, have said that a lot of people have gone with this craziness of prices, you know, new companies, 25, 30, $40 for a new cigar because they're trying to follow Habano. And even though Habanos has quality control problems, has shortages, we estimate that the fakes are around 18 to 20 million cigars a year. People will not, again, buy those cigars because they are expensive. I'll give you an example. You could buy a Fuente cigar, let's say an Opus X, let's say any size, for $20 in the States. In the States, there's people going to the retail shops and they're selling that same Opus for $40. The Dubai cigar that sells 100, 110, 120, people are paying for Amor de Desierto up to 150. I saw it in the States, 175. In Chicago, I saw it for 200. The Opus X 25th anniversary, people are paying up to $500. Now tell me, outside of limited editions, regionals from Habanos, and Coiba Behiki, what other brand you could ask for double the price and it sells? Because again, there's a lot of people who have tried to ride the train of expensive, and I see it in Europe, and it doesn't work. It's sitting in the stores. Yeah, they put in 10 boxes, they've sold maybe a box, but when you have in the store, you bought 10 boxes and you've had them there for 6 or 7 months, and you sold maybe a box, and you have 9 boxes that you bought at maybe $3 or $4 or $500 a box sitting there, I'll tell you, it doesn't work. I don't care what anybody says. I see it. It's not working.
Preach, Professor. Well, shifting from the price point a little bit, Matt, I would love to bring you in and hear your thoughts about some of the experience aspects of things. And, you know, manufacturing, commercial aspects being one thing. At the end of the day, it's all about the experience, how the consumers and the community perceive products. And so first, I would love to hear if you've seen anything interesting, exciting, or surprising in terms of an experience that manufacturers offer, whether that is in terms of packaging and presentation, but also in terms of incentives, events, or other formats to engage with the community and with their consumers. Matt, I think you're just on mute, so.
My apologies. I stepped away for a moment. Could you repeat that question?
I was curious about the experience side of things. If you saw particular aspects of experience on the consumer side that you found very interesting or exciting, whether that is through specific packaging and presentation or events and other formats that the manufacturers are offering to, you know, engage with their audience and create this very specialized experience for their consumers.
Yeah, I mean, I love the packaging aspect. I think there's a lot of unique and beautiful, really over the top, well done packaging. I have no problem with that. All the way down to, you know, cigars that are packed and shipped in paper bundles. I think there's room for all of that. As far as the in-person experience goes, I love the fact that there are a lot of in addition to in-store events, which I don't have any problem with in-store events. I think they're great. It's a great opportunity for brands to showcase themselves and for the local cigar community to get together at a shop when either a sales rep or a brand owner comes in to showcase their brand. But my favorite experience pieces are where the consumers get to see behind the curtain. And, you know, a lot of that comes from factory experiences. And they're not as prevalent as they were, 5, 7, 10 years ago. But there are still some experiences like that happening, and even some experiences like that happening in the States, where you can not necessarily get the factory tour experience, but you can get somewhat behind the curtain. You can see some of the farms, some of the tobacco growing farms in the United States, Connecticut, for example, Pennsylvania, and see the way the tobacco is grown, see the tobacco hung in the barns to cure. But to me, the best experiences I've had are the experiences in Nicaragua and Dominican Republic, seeing the process from sorting of the seeds all the way to the banding and boxing of the cigars at the end, and every step in between. I love that. I think every consumer who considers him or herself to be a lover of premium cigars owes it to themselves to at least once in their life go and see that with their own eyes, and to smell the pilones, and to smoke a cigar right off the roller's table, after that wrapper leaf is put on, and to see just every step of the process. I think that's an experience that every cigar smoker, every retailer owes it to themselves to do that at least once, if not once a year.
That is an excellent point, Matt. And also part of the reason why I brought up this topic is something that I saw more and more over the course of the year. And I think it was primarily in 2023 that it caught my attention more frequently, is more brands seem to get involved with cigar lounges in the US. And at this moment in time, I'm not so sure yet whether it is just, putting their name on it, or going into some sort of a joint venture to probably showcase the brand more prominently. But that's where it ends. I think that's still to be seen. But I'm curious as to whether you have any thoughts on that, or if you have made a similar observation that it seems to be becoming more prevalent that there is branded cigar lounges or joint ventures or shared projects between manufacturers and independent lounge operators.
I think it is. There has been a slight increase in that in the States. I don't think it's been massive in the last few years, but there are some brands who are there are some brands who are going in that route of either building and opening their own lounges, or partnering with a retailer to call it the XYZ brand cigar lounge. I don't really have a problem with it one way or the other. I think it's if it's a way for it to be a mutually beneficial partnership, I think that's fine, as long as one of the parties who benefits is the consumer. I really think it's fine. I think there's a slight, especially companies who actually manage or open these lounges on their own. I mean, the biggest, pardon me, the biggest example I can think of is Rocky Patel has the Burn lounges throughout the United States. I apologize. I have no idea if there are any outside of the United States. And I think part of that, there's a what's the word? There's I guess, like a earned hubris that comes along with that. And I believe Rocky has earned it to have, your name on a lounge somewhere. I'm not going to name any names, but I think there is. I have seen examples of branded lounges that I'm not necessarily sure, in my personal opinion, if they have earned it. But it's their money. They can do what they choose. But I think, again, as long as one of the parties that benefits from that relationship is the consumer, I'm all for it.
Thanks, Matt. Ben, Jay, have you made similar observations, or is that something that that you have any thoughts about, or think it's even a story?
You want to go ahead, Ben, or
You go first.
I think Matt has a point. I think it depends. I think, for example, Davidoff blend bars have done well. Rock Patel Burns have done well. Obviously, like the Arturo Fuente Club in San Domingo has done well. An interesting experiment that I think if you had asked me about it 4 or 5 years ago, I may have had a different opinion. But Cigars International and Casa de Montecristo have opened a lot of lounges in the United States. And at first, I was kind of skeptical about it, but I think it's been very good. Those lounges or bars have introduced a lot of new smokers, and ultimately, it's been beneficial to the mom and pop operators, which I would not have predicted. So it's difficult to say. I know that there are other companies that are doing some lounges, and I think it just depends. I think Matt hit on it. Is if there's going to be a lounge for company X, what is the benefit going to be to the consumer? And I think also there's two types of lounges. If you look at Rocky Patel Burn or Davidoff Blend, those are really destination places. People don't really go to a burn to buy 3 boxes of Edge. They don't go to a Davidoff Blend bar to buy a box of Double R, for the most part. I mean, there's people that sometimes do, but I think if you make the lounge and it's specifically going to provide, maybe there'll be a special cigar. And some companies have done very well with that, where they have 10 or 11 or 12 lounges, and you can get a certain cigar or maybe a series of cigars. It's something that's interesting. I know that, for example, there was a time when we had our store was branded with a lounge with a company, and one of the cool things they did is they gave us a slight break on price, so we were able to offer a little bit better price to our consumers. And also, we had a couple of special vitolas that they had just made. So I think it can work in the right situation. So it's like anything else. It can work for the good. It can work for the bad. And obviously, I think that there's companies out there that are doing some of this stuff right now that maybe we look at that and we're like, I don't know if that's a really good idea. But I think time will tell. Because I certainly didn't think when a Casa de Montecristo opened up 2.9 miles from my store 6 years ago that it was a good thing for me. I was dead wrong. It was good for that company. It was good for me. It was good for the other brick and mortars in town. It was good for the city of Dallas. So it just depends on the situation, and I think time will tell. And I'm very happy, honestly, that my competitor, who's also a supplier of mine, opened a store to compete with me. But I did not think I would have said that 5 years ago.
Yeah, a good friend of mine that owns a cigar shop in my hometown, he has a saying that high tide raises all ships. And I mean, that was a good example of what Jay just mentioned. But I mean, I agree with basically what Matt and Jay said. I mean, I don't think there's as many lounges being labeled, or being sponsored by cigar companies as much as it used to be. Like, I remember, mid 2000s, late 2000s, there was kind of a common thing where cigar companies would put their name on different shops, lounges, or whatever. But I think the best ones were if that company made a special cigar or a special vitola to offer to that lounge, then that was something the consumer could look forward to. It's something I could look forward to. to go in and, oh, I will go to this lounge that's say like an Avo lounge or a Davidoff lounge, and they'll have a special cigar only available at that location. That was always a draw for me. And so I know it's probably other consumers, it's a big draw too.
Excellent point. Before coming to the end of the show, and just because we want to be respectful of everybody's time here, I'm thoroughly enjoying this, and what an inspiring and enlightening panel discussion here with all of you today. I would love to go around the table and hear a few of your thoughts. I asked Jose in the beginning what was most surprising to him, but what were some of the things that you felt were particularly challenging during 2023 for the industry at large? And what are some of the things that you're most looking forward to for the upcoming year? And Matt, maybe we can start with you.
Well, I'll say I think the two biggest challenges in 2023 for the industry, the one is always the challenge every year, and that is government interference and government overreach. That's the number one threat in our rearview mirror every year. I think there was great progress made, and I give great thanks to organizations like the CRA and PCA for continuing to do the work that they do. I think one other threat that started to rear up in 2022, but really had a field day in 2023 is related to social media and social media cracking down on cigar related content because they tend to fall into the same mindset as a lot of politicians, wherein they put all tobacco products into the same big category, even though we all know premium hand-rolled cigars are a completely different entity. I personally know people who had their content removed from their cigar related content removed from YouTube and or Facebook and or X, formerly Twitter. And I believe that's a threat to the consumers who enjoy learning about some of the deeper areas and information about premium hand-rolled cigars. And I believe in the long run, if those crackdowns and blocks on social media continue to happen for cigar related content, I think it's got a potential to be detrimental to the industry as a whole, because although in the premium cigar world, print media is still king, the overwhelming majority of consumers today, and the percentage is going to continue to increase, they get their information and their entertainment from social media, and especially niche markets like premium cigars, because the world we live in has made it easy for people who have a passion for this to put their voice out there about products and cultures that they identify with and enjoy. And I think we should all be diligent to try as hard as we can to make sure that premium cigar related content is still available on platforms like YouTube, Facebook, and so on.
Matt, excellent points, and thank you very much for sharing. One positive for 2024. What are you most looking forward to?
Oh, wow. I honestly don't I can't say if there's a specific one. I'd say I'm just grateful to be in any way, shape, or form. I'm first of all, I'm grateful to be a consumer. I am grateful to be a consumer. I love premium cigars. I love trying as many cigars as I possibly can. I love everything about the industry, and I love getting to know more and more people from the industry. I'm just grateful to be a part of it in any capacity whatsoever, and to be able to have how about that cigar and get to meet so many people from the industry and learn their stories and hear about their families and their histories and their struggles and their triumphs has been one of the great joys of my life, outside of the number one joy in my life, which is my family. But I'm just looking forward to another great year of premium cigars, and I'm always excited for what's coming next. I can't wait to see what some of these great people in the industry have up their sleeve, because every time it comes out, I'm excited for it.
Matt, that in a nutshell is a perfect statement. And if we could have only recorded this one sentence or explanation of yours for this entire show, it would have been worthwhile. And I think it speaks volumes about you as a human being, and how much I appreciate you and your fellowship and friendship. But you have perfectly expressed what this industry is all about and why it is the most beautiful industry in this world. So kudos to you, and thank you very much for that excellent remark. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Jay, over to you.
Well, I think we're always going to have headwinds, whether it's the Food and Drug Administration in the United States or the United Nations or what have you. And there's obviously concerns with growing tobacco, whether it's the weather or the governments. But I'm pretty excited. I hear stories from when Jose was younger that there was a time when cigar makers were very worried about the future of the industry, and they encouraged their children to do other things. I recently had a conversation with Lito Gomez and Jose Blanco in the Dominican, and the excitement about the next generation. I think that the young people who are in their 20s and 30s, and even the young people that are in their teens thinking about this, who are in cigar families, I think the future is very bright for future cigar innovation. It's not like it was when Carlito was younger, when a lot of his friends were encouraged to do other things that he wanted to be in tobacco. So I think the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years I'm very excited about it. And I think that that's going to bring some great things, because as you get more people, more excitement, more passion, I think that's good for the industry. I think we're definitely a growing industry, and that's good to see. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about to see what happens with the premium cigar trade show being earlier in the year. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I think that things are positive for our industry. We're always going to have headwinds, but the difference is we're a little bit more prepared as an industry now to deal with government regulation, wherever it may be. I mean, you saw New Zealand is backtracking now on the generational smoking ban. There's even the mayor of London has a few people that agree with them that maybe cigars shouldn't be outlawed. So I think the future's bright. And of course, in 2023, or maybe it's going to be 2024, Padron Fuente, maybe the biggest release since, I don't know, Partagas 150, which was like 28 years ago. Maybe the biggest release in the last 40 years in the cigar industry. Even though people may only get to smoke maybe one or two of those cigars, just the celebration of two companies, two families making those cigars, that's very exciting. So I'm very optimistic about the next year. Sales may be a little bit lower over the next couple of years, but I don't think we're going back to pre-pandemic levels. So I'm very optimistic.
Jay, I love that spark of positivity, and the people who know me are well aware of the fact that I'm a hopeless optimist by nature as well. So yes, I love that. Besides the fact that you are an integral part of this industry, and I consider you one of the most accomplished and most certainly leading cigar retailers in the United States, besides the fact that you do a tremendous job as part of the PCA on the board level and fighting for this industry at large. So also to you, my sincerest respect and regards for everything that you do, and keep up the amazing work. I very, very much look forward to sharing a cigar with you early next year, and hopefully spending some quality time together with you in Dallas again. It was fabulous visiting you this year. So that was one of the highlights.
Thank you,
of 2023.
and happy holidays to you and your family.
Thank you, Jay. Much appreciated. Ben, over to you for some closing remarks.
Yeah, I miss my little home in Dallas when I lived there too, of Jay's shop. That's was a special place. I really miss going there and hanging out. One of the things that I'm kind of concerned with and kind of intrigued by was we talked about this a little bit. What Jose did was about the stability of the tobacco crops from all over. Whether it's damage from weather, political instability, just not losing workers for the fields and whatnot. We don't have a lot of tobaccos as we used to, as much tobacco. Connecticut broadleaf is almost impossible to find, if you can find it at all. Stuff like that. Kind of, what is the short-term and long-term effects on the cigar industries with the supply of tobaccos right now? But then also the flip side of that, I'm kind of curious of how, with the lack of some of these more popular tobaccos, or the unavailability of some completely, what intriguing new blends will we now see because of that? Some more unique blends that maybe we haven't come across yet, or maybe even new growing regions popping up for different tobaccos. Like, for instance, I live now in Western North Carolina in the United States, on the eastern part of the United States. And I live in a very mountainous area now. And there's actually one of the colleges here, one of the universities, is experimenting with growing broadleaf tobacco in Western North Carolina, which Carolina has a rich history of tobacco growing, in Virginia as well, our northern state. But apparently broadleaf has never been grown here. So they're experimenting with it to see how well it will grow as a crop here. And I'm curious to, if it will grow, how will that taste? What will that be like? I mean, we see how great of a difference, broadleaf is between Pennsylvania and the Connecticut River Valley. So what will happen here? So it's kind of exciting to see what might happen with the, tobaccos growing in new regions that we'd never really considered. And like I said, new blends. So, I mean, that's kind of a twofold thing. It's a little bit concerning, but it's also could be an area of opportunity as well. So how will that turn out? I think that's really good, and something we talked about before about these new cigar companies coming in and starting up. Now, I'm all for every new company. I would encourage them, if you want to try it, go for it. Shoot for the stars, go after your dream and try it out, because nothing excites me more than basically finding when we go to PCA, where as the Coop Coalition team, we're doing these interviews at different booths at the PCA trade show. We come across somebody we don't really know nothing about, and we go interview them, and they have an amazing story, and they have really awesome new blend that I didn't even know they existed, and I try it, and it's like, wow, this is really good stuff. We need to talk about this. So it's really exciting, and so that gets me pumped up for each trade show. So see what happened in the industry. There's a lot of good. I think the future is bright. There's a lot of good things that possibly come down the road.
Lovely to hear as well. And Ben, also to you, congratulations for the continued excellence in your work and your contribution to the industry as part of the Smoking Syndicate, the Coop Coalition, everything that you do. It's true, it's honest and sincere, and we need more of that in the cigar industry. And great content and great conversations, people who share the good, the bad, the positive, the negative, whatever it is, but share it as it is with honesty and integrity. And I thank you for that. And I very much look forward to hosting you as our guest of honor in one of the early shows in 2024. And I certainly look forward to seeing you in March as well at the trade show and spending some quality time with you over a cigar.
Yeah, save the feelings mutual.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Absolute privilege and pleasure. Thanks for everything you shared with us. Jose, closing statements. Who else?
Well,
than the professor?
well, first of all, as always, a great show. I was happy that Ben was here, of course, Jay, Matt, which I only see him at the show now. Look, there's things that worry me for next year, and definitely I'm not going to lie about it. Even though, to be honest, it's not a problem that's going to affect us at all and some companies that we know, but it's the situation of Ecuador, the situation of Nicaragua, the migration of people living, political instability in some countries, the economical situation in the States, the election in the States. We have to take that in consideration. Something we haven't talked about. The worst situation in Cuba in the last, since the revolution started, Cuba is going through the worst period of their lives. It's an island and the salt is rationalized. Could you imagine that? You make salt, where the sea is, you put 4 pieces of wood there and you have salt, and the salt is rationalized. Even though it does not affect us at all, on the contrary, it has given an opportunity to a lot of brands in Europe, in Western Europe, in the Middle East, in the Far East, to sell cigars, but it's still it's a worrisome situation. Another thing I look forward, of course, Pro Cigar. I look forward to the show. I enjoy being at the show, and not just because we're there to sell cigars, because as many know, we're not there to sell cigars. We're just to interact with our clients, have a cigar, have a smoke, see the media people, consumers that go there too. And I just hope that we have a great year. And the only message I could send out, especially and this goes to all the companies, guys, if the product is not ready, don't ship it. Because consumers today are very demanding. They're listening to all these shows. They're traveling to Nicaragua. They're going to Honduras. They're going to Dominican. They're going all over to learn. And I think it was Jay who said it, but I'm going to repeat it. You could be smoking for a year. You could be smoking for 50 years till you do not go and spend 2 or 3 days in a factory, and you're in a curing barn, and you're in the fermentation room, and you smoke a cigar just made right off the table, you don't know what you're missing, because it's an experience that I recommend to all cigar smokers all over the world. It doesn't matter how long you've been smoking. I don't care if you've been smoking for a week. Go if you can and see what it's all about. Reinhard, and you can always count on me. And it's been a pleasure. It's been a great year for all of us. And we just pray to God that we have a great year again, and that, the political situation in a lot of countries just don't screw us up.
Absolutely. I'm completely with you, Jose. And thank you very much for your fellowship, your friendship throughout the years, for joining us here at the Light 'em Up Lounge whenever you find a spare moment in your very, very busy schedule, all your travels, and all the work that you do. It's inspiring and always enlightening to have somebody like a Jose Blanco next to me, sharing your experience and your expertise. It is greatly appreciated, and I hope that a lot more of the young cigar enthusiasts appreciate and understand the wealth of knowledge that can be perceived, experienced, and grasped and taken in by exceptional people like yourself, like George Brightman, who sent his apologies. He was tied up in a couple of urgencies, so he couldn't join us today, but sends his regards to all of you. I think it's so important especially for the younger generation, to appreciate the mentorship and the fellowship and the support and experience from industry icons, and I dare saying old schoolers, because Jose, I know very few people who are as young at heart as you are, but that is so important and so much appreciated. With that, I would love to not only thank all of you, but also announce one last time, in exactly 1 week from today, we will celebrate our annual Light 'em Up Cigar Family Christmas, December 20th, same time, same station, 8 p.m. Central European Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with a lot of manufacturers, brand owners, tobacco men and women, our friends and family, all the Light 'em Up community joining us. So please, to all of you here, to our panel, to our guests, chime in again next week. It's always a most joyful and festive show of the year. Light 'em Up Cigar Family Christmas, same time, same station, next week here at the lounge. For tonight, I want to wholeheartedly thank Matt Tai from How About That Cigar, Ben Lee, the bull shark, as he named himself, part of the Smoking Syndicate and the Coop Coalition. We want to thank Jay Davis from Blue Smoke of Dallas, and of course the one and only Professor Jose Blanco from Arturo Fuente International. Thank you all for your time, for your expertise, and sharing all of that with us. It is greatly appreciated, and I wish you a lovely rest of your day, and we'll see you all again next week here at the Light 'em Up Lounge. Until then, you be safe, well, and healthy. Take care and light 'em up. Bye-bye, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jose.